Our chalice lighting this morning. The Chalice is a Symbol by Deborah Falk. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all of her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us.
Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. Oh, bring your pain and sorrow and joy. There's a place for them upon the altar of life. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. This is a place of grace, place of losing and finding our way upon the winding road. Meeting and parting, stumbling and starting over. Every story is sacred here, even yours, even yours. So come on in and do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome in. Come in and do not leave your cares at the door. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester's online Sunday morning worship service. We are glad that you have joined us virtually this morning. It is an act of love that we gather in this way during this time of pandemic response. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes to gather in community so that we might care for each other, take a moment to reflect on our own well-being, and discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment, even as we are at a personal distance. We will gather this way through the winter. Through the next few months, our religious exploration program will be offering opportunities for children and youth to gather virtually as well. Please visit www.uucworcester.org for more information on these get-togethers, as well as other opportunities to meet for discussion and support. For safety purposes, and so that we may come to know you better as you are able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that this service is not being live streamed over Facebook this morning, but is being recorded and will be available on the church YouTube channel and the service archive on our website in the coming days. Following this service this morning, you are invited to join us for a virtual fellowship hour.
We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the birds, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as a flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the sky, it tells us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as the children raise all their faces to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the seas, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as a flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love.
And now you may have known that my mother, Wendy, had grown up in the First Unitarian Church downtown, and that Mom and Dad had married there. But what brought us to this church, this congregation, was that a child in our neighborhood had died suddenly, and people were talking about him as being an angel in heaven. And then I started to talk about angels in heaven. And that was the point at which my parents said, oh, we need help. And we're going to bring our children to church because we can't answer these questions alone. And so we ended up here. But what I wanted to share this morning was really my very first memory of church. So that's kind of the story for today. So, and it was a foundational moment in my faith development. Now, some of you may remember the Haunting House curriculum. That was way back when, and it was the kind of curriculum that I think was so designed to be very comprehensive. It was using the metaphor of the house to explore multiple aspects of a young child's life, from family to church to body and everything. And I always knew, growing up, encountering other Unitarian Universalist congregations, I always knew when a congregation was doing the Haunting House curriculum because there would be the city of boxes in probably their fellowship hall, because that was the biggest space for them. Because one of the great exercises, the great treats of this curriculum, is that we were all invited to create our own house. And so you'd have this colony of stove and refrigerator boxes that would spring up in what was the kind of usually the largest space in a congregation, which is also, in the case of Holden Street, where coffee hour happened as well. And so here we are, creating our own personal expression of home within the church. Now mine, somewhere there's a Polaroid, somewhere, of me peeking out from underneath my house, and it has a big blue bat painted on the front of it so that I would ward off my little brothers, because that was important. So no, you should not come in here. This is my space. Now, what was important about being in Fellowship Hall is that I had this moment after we had been kind of constructed our village, where I could see that the adults were also in the same space. We were also all together in the space. And for a moment, I could tell, here are the adults seeing what I have created. And that the adults saw me and I could see them. And that we were all together as this beloved community. I didn't necessarily have the words beloved community, but I had that sense in that moment of feeling accepted and seen and encouraged. And that was a singular moment of establishing kind of my relationship with the congregation, as well as within Unitarian Universalism, because that said, if this is what this church is about, then this is what this faith must also be about. And I can't tell you how grateful I am and how much I still appreciate the starting gift that was that experience. So that, to me, was an expression of love, and in essence is, my house got to be the house that love built. And start from there. Here ends the story.
Our reading this morning, kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness at the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend.
Thank you, Sherry. In this moment, in our gathering, church is made real and born into existence by all that we offer, by our love and our skill and our talent and our generosity. And that remains true in our online structure as well. So in this moment, I invite you, this is a good window of time if you'd like to make your offering for this week. I am of the belief that any day, any time of the week that ends in Y is a good time to give, but let's give right now because this is a sacred act, in essence, of giving together. So you're invited to text your offering to 508-231-5335 or visit uuworcester.org/donate. And we're also accepting emergency funds as well. Thank you for all that you give, for all that you do, for all that comes together to create this beloved community every day and in all the ways that we gather and in all the ways that we will gather. Let us begin our offering at this time.
As we lift our voices on this day, many hearts are heavy with despair. How can our lifted voices find a way to bring us one step closer to repair? If a wounded world we wish to heal, we must sing no ordinary song. Make it a cadence relevant and real, its every measure purposeful and strong. Let this song our greatest hopes contain, well-fed children be its just refrain. Roofs over every heartbeat be its tune. from peaceful cities hewn. Sing of hope while hammering each nail. Sing of joy while pulling every weed. Sing to renew a covenant grown frail. May every alleluia plant a seed. May every alleluia plant a seed.
We are grateful to mark the time with seasons, to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, or gather to remember our loved ones. In all of these seasons, may we give thanks for the breath of life, every mindful moment, recognizing again the fragile nature of existence. May we live fully in each moment as we gather. And as we move into the end of the old year and into the coming new, we gather in mystery and in the bonds of beloved community. May we radiate love both within the circle of care and beyond our congregation. So now is the time for sharing of joys and sorrows, or names and milestones. You're welcome to say them out loud in our gathering, and also welcome to type them into the chat, and I will share them with the congregation.
I have a joy. Today is my eldest daughter's 23rd birthday.
I have a joy. Reading the Sunday paper this morning, I see for the second time this week that Aaron is in the news, and this time I am just amazed and appreciate so much his efforts to help the homeless in Worcester with Mr. Gonzalez. It just is an amazing story, which I hope everyone reads.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Well, for prayers from Kim Napoleon for her Osborne cousins' family. 3 out of 4 of them have COVID, and 1 is in the hospital. We offer our prayers for the whole family. I invite us to take a moment, for certainly there is so much in our hearts, more than we can possibly share together, spoken out loud. Whether, even if we had hours to spend in worship, there is so much in our hearts. Let us take one more moment for all the sorrows, for all of the joys, for all of the remarkable things that we are sharing and are present in our lives. Let us take one more moment in silence. I invite you into a further reflection on prayer and meditation that we have within us and around us so many joys. I am reminded that while many of us are looking forward to the end of 2020 and would look forward to having it be truly hindsight, that there were also wonderful events and wonderful things that happened this year. Life-giving, life-celebrating, wonderful, wonderful news and developments. Children being born, people graduating, all of these are also with us. And they are also with us in our hearts. Let us offer our prayers and our reflection for all who are traveling in this time, that they are safe, that they remain healthy, that each of us is in traveling on the way in our own journeys and trying to make choices about what the right thing to do on those journeys might be. Let us offer our best wishes for all who travel. And let us also hold before us all who are monitoring and administering how we might move into our next window of time with vaccinations and with what next year might look like. We offer our prayers for wisdom collectively and individually, that we may be guided by what we have learned and reminded that we are all in this together. We are not having the same experience, but we are all in this human experience. So let me close with a reminder of love. May we find love in this place, love in our hearts, love for the broken down, love for the lonely, love for those in between, love for those out of our reach. May we find love, add love, and be love in this world. Amen.
Holy One, source of radiance and reason, of radiance among and beyond, among and beyond us.
I want to begin with a song that I learned from Religious Education Week at Ferry Beach a couple of years ago. It was kind of the theme song for the entire summer. And it's from the group Ma Muse. And they sing, "We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round, attend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love." It's so good to be in worship with you. And I want to thank Matt and Sherry for managing everything this morning, and for Reverend Aaron for inviting me back again. At this time of year, as we're just past Christmas and looking into the new year, I have incarnation on my mind. Incarnation. And I think I might not be alone in feeling kind of both wondrous with the idea that we're in this moment of embodiment and celebration and holidays and welcoming the new life before us and the new baby and the return of the sun and all of the things that we're welcoming in these holidays and holy days. And I'm also feeling a bit weary as this year comes to a close. As we move from the end of this year and into the start of the next, as we pass through all the layers of the winter holidays that keep marking the time and calling us onward. One I want to recognize in particular this morning is that today is the second day of Kwanzaa, the African American holiday that runs from December 26th through January 1st. And the creator, Maulana Karenga, established the practice and the symbols drawing from all across Africa. And the 7 candles on the kinara, the candle holder that is symbolic of Kwanzaa, represents 7 principles of African heritage. And today's candle is for Kujitagalia, which is self-determination, to define and name ourselves and speak for ourselves. So I want to recognize that today happens to be the second day of Kwanzaa. So as we are so marking the time with all of these holidays and holy days, I confess to feeling a bit reflective and even nostalgic. I have to say, I am so loving the chance to, even though I'm not there in person, that I get to have a little bit of Christmas at Holden Street right behind me. Because this is the church of my memory and my experience, and it's a joy just to kind of have a little bit of this right here. Because for so many years, I've had the pleasure of leading this worship after Christmas And one of the exponential leaps in skills needed for ministry this year is that we can, in fact, gather together. Most of you are scattered across Massachusetts, and I am standing in my home office in Peoria, Illinois. And I am just months into my new ministry with this congregation. One of the things I get to celebrate in this time is that you all ordained me into ministry a little over 20 years ago. I'm still kind of flummoxed by how many years that has been. It has not seemed quite so long, but it has been 20 years. So I want to explore a little bit of the incarnation that has been and is the church as we look into the coming year. One of the greatest and highest values that I have experienced in faith and experienced in this congregation is that of love. It's one of the ones that's both ephemeral and foundational. It is the kind that is, love is that one of those words that's kind of up in the air and intangible, and you can't, there are no words to kind of fully encompass it, which kind of indicates if the language is hard to capture it, that means it's probably a pretty transcendent value. And at the same time, the experience of love, the creation of love, the knowledge of it binds us and is essential to the human spirit and our quality of life. And I think for me, this congregation certainly established a sense of love. And it did so with those circles, those nested circles that are part of this congregation's symbols. And this is where I want to share a screen as I'm doing this. Let me see if I can do this well. I am still early in some of my technological adaptation. Bear with me, please. There we go. Outwitted. He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, and a thing to flout, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. Now, this is one of those singular symbols, because this was on the handouts, in the pews, in the sanctuary, all the time. And as someone who spent a lot of time sitting in those pews as a child, this is one of the things I could read and look at. And I read this one again and again and again. So this was the way that I started to understand love. It was the symbol that was associated with humanism, but it was one of the ways I started to understand love. That we keep circling and encircling and encircling, that we can create something that is big enough and welcoming enough and inclusive enough for everyone, no matter where we were coming from, no matter the name calling and the opinions of each other, that we could figure out a way to do so. I'm going to stop sharing. And I was thinking about these circles and the symbols of the congregation, in part because of Betty Genuine's wonderful work on the church Facebook group, doing these kind of throwback and historic moments and bringing them forward. That in fact, these symbols, all of the world religions symbols that are at the congregation, came about from Paul and his father, Per Gustafson, to try to make the building look a little bit more like a religious gathering, a little bit more like a church. And he created these out of aluminum and with backing, and inside the sanctuary. I don't know if you've looked at these in depth, looked at these circles that are in the sanctuary, but it's not just the shiny aluminum that is so pretty and so attractive, but it's also that they have deep velvet behind them. And that they were put up and dedicated right around the time that I was born, even though we hadn't gotten to the church yet. So from the very beginning of my experience with the congregation, I had this question of connection between love and humanism, which for me was the connection of how do we live this life well? How do we keep encircling and encircling? How do we keep welcoming? And I think we have this conversation in our larger Unitarian Universalism as well. We keep coming back to the conversation of why do we gather and how do we gather, and why do we gather and how do we gather? In the spirit of love, we are called to keep living into this elusive transcendent value that cannot be captured and completely described. That love is felt and known and is beyond words or music or even art, even though all of them kind of touch on them in various ways. But it's caught in glimpses, but it's made manifest in us. James Luther Adams, the 20th century Unitarian Universalist theologian, reminds us that there is no immaculate conception of virtue. That part of what we are called to do as a liberal religious body is keep incarnating what we say is most important to us. That what we say is our values must be made real and lived in order to be relevant, in order to be able to be applied and useful and make a difference and keep motivating us as we're going forward. I think that's one of the driving reasons why it's been so important to have such a strong foundation in religious community in this year, so that we can keep moving out of that foundation of love and keep being adaptable and keep embracing evolution, which we do, and keep trying to be prepared for what comes next, as well as being present to what's going on around us. The reading from Niobe Shihab Nye about kindness also touches on what does it mean to understand the absence of something, how to value something so important, such as connection, recognize our mortality, and how shall we live well. Part of what I hear in her poem is that the knowledge of sorrow, the knowledge of loss, informs our awareness and desire for love. That sorrow is to have lost something dear, to have been cared for, to have been part of something beloved. And in Naomi's poem, I hear a depth of loss, what was counted on and what would like to be returned and restored and valued again. And I want to share a story about something that I had to sort this out for myself in relationship to this congregation, and I want to share the story because it bears on how we manifest love in our lives and the implications of that for the people around us. So while I learned about, at a very deep level, the importance of being welcomed, the importance of being seen and recognized and accepted, and the importance that we do this together, not any one of us can do it alone. What I also learned was how the congregation manifest and expressed pain around religion and religious history on a personal level. I had invited one of my friends from high school to come with me to church when we were all in high school together at our lockers at Wachusett Regional. And I was talking about the congregation and said, I want to invite you. We're really welcoming, we're inclusive, we're accepting of other religions. And he paused and said, I've heard you. And based on how I've heard you talk about other religions, you don't sound that accepting or that welcoming. And I had to think about that for a little bit. What I realized had happened was that along the way of absorbing lessons of love, I had also absorbed, and my classmates had as well, that a really negative response to some degrees of organized religion, and particularly around Christianity. That wasn't what was intended, but it was what I had learned. And it wasn't from any one person, or any one teacher, or any one family, or any one part, but somewhere along the lines I had learned that to be critical of folks who were Christian in particular. You know, we could celebrate Christmas and Easter, but talking about times prayer was really not in the daily conversation. And belief in some of these pieces, belief in God or devotion to Jesus, was even dismissed as irrational and deluded at worst. And so in that moment, I had to think about this, that this was not the congregation that I knew. That's why I'm looking at the poem about kindness, What Has Been Lost. This was not the congregation that I knew, the one that was supposed to be encircling and loving. And I had to ponder this for quite some time. Now, I'm going to give you the end. I'm still here, right? That doesn't change that. But the process of realizing that what I had thought was the case was different and even counter to what I had been taught. That also is part of the experience. I wondered about this a little bit, and I'll say it got reinforced with me. I had gone off to divinity school, felt the call to ministry, and been off at divinity school and came back to lead worship for the first time. And in the course of planning the worship, I asked about, well, hey, isn't there a benediction? And the response I received was, benediction, that's too religious. That to say a good word at the end of worship was too religious. Now, that was my experience at the time. It's been very helpful for me to have had that and to be able to reflect on that for all of the time that I have. One, because I can go and talk about that with other congregations and say, let's make sure we're talking about what's being taught, both the intentional and the unintentional curriculum for people of all ages, especially our children, but people of all ages. I also was able to recognize the depths of pain that many people have in their religious past. And because of the foundation of love, I was able to have compassion for that experience and to understand it wasn't intentional. The impact was real, but it wasn't intentional. And how can we take care of the congregations, any congregation, and Unitarian Universalism, so that we have a chance for people to address the kind of pain that can lead to that unintentional curriculum. And I'm also able to talk about the experience, and even now, as we're even 20 years later, be able to talk with congregations and with people to say, let's make sure we realize how we're manifesting love in the world and what we truly intend, that our impact matches our intent. The reason I want to offer that reflection here in this moment is because we're coming to the end of a year. We're collectively We have been so deeply and profoundly traumatized, where we have layers upon layers of tragedy and sorrow and loss. And it is truly incalculable and deep as a society. And the collective grief by itself will ripple into the future. We are not going to come out of this the same as we were before. So as we consider the purpose of the congregation and the reflection of why we gather and how we bring love into the world, how we are incarnation ourselves, one of the things we get to reflect and consider and maybe reconnect with is the value of the beloved community, how we are resilient and adaptive, but also thoughtful and try to be emotionally intelligent and give each other enough space for all the feelings that we have, for all the reactions that we have, and to be able to articulate to each other, this is where it's hard for me. That would be one of those great circles that Edwin Markham was talking about, not wit, but compassion and embrace and inclusion at our own time and our own space and pace. We get to manifest that going into the future. There's been so much that's already been done in this congregation. I know I was talking with Aaron about how much has been shifted and adapted to respond to how church is now. And it's all helping him and the team and you and us go forward into tomorrow. I'm not entirely sure what next year is going to look like, but we get a chance to keep fulfilling what we say is most important to us and keep love ahead of us and keep making it relevant and real, as James Luther Adams reminds us, that there is no immaculate incarnation. There is no immaculate conception of virtue. So in this time, if you are in a space of lower activity, we don't take all of this work up at once, but a little at a time, and a little at a time. And then that might help us individually and together do the next right thing and the next right thing. We are travelers and seekers and humans, trying to make it through the world amid our mortal lives. Let us do everything within our power to live this life well. And let this be a place of compassion and passion and joy. 40 years ago, I found radical acceptance from the view from outside, from peering out of my refrigerator box. 30 years or so ago, I started to understand how love enacted is a complicated experience, but it's inherent in human meaning making. That we recognize the struggle and the pain as well as what we're aspiring to do together. 20 or so years ago, you entrusted me with ministry. And today, you're adapting and building what has been to enter into the next decade, the next decades of our existence. It is good to be here. It is good to be in this moment and to be reflecting on this with you. Thank you for the opportunity. Let us go forth from this moment. Amen. And I want to close with a litany from Reverends Susan Frederick Gray and Erica Hewitt, talking about no one is outside the circle of love. And it's adapted from a pastoral message that Reverend Susan Gray, Frederick Gray wrote as her work as president of our Unitarian Universalist Association. We know that hurt moves through the world, perpetuated by action, inaction, and indifference. Our values call us to live in the reality of heartbreak in our world, remembering that no one is
outside the circle
love.
of love.
We who are Unitarian Universalist not only affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we also affirm the inherent wholeness of every being, despite apparent brokenness.
No one is outside the circle of love.
We know that things break or break down, promises, friendship, sobriety, hope, communication. This breaking happens because our human hearts and our very institutions are frail and imperfect. We make mistakes. Life is messy.
No one is outside the circle of love.
With compassion as our guide, we seek the well-being of all people. We seek to dismantle systems of oppression that undermine collective humanity. We believe that we're here to guide one another toward love.
No one is outside the circle of love.
No matter how fractured we are or once were, we can make whole people of ourselves. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live. And no one is outside the circle of love. And our closing hymn is We Shall Be Known by Monmuse.
We shall be known by the company.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Get this to work. Sorry. Boom. Just hang on a half second. Just 1 second.
Is it not playing for you, Matt?
It's not right at the moment. I'm trying.
You know, Matt, I can just sing it again. It's good.
It worked. Everything works before. I'm gonna just take it back one, and then we'll. Yeah, maybe. I don't know why this is not working at the moment.
I have the slides too. If I take away your screen sharing capability, I may be able to share it.
It was beautiful, actually. If I could describe, I don't know why this is not coming.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me give it a go.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company.
Now you may get it twice.
By the ones who circle round and fire. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now.
It is time. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May the love that overcomes all differences, that heals all wounds, that puts to flight all fears, that reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Our worship is ended. Let our service begin.
You want to give it a go, Matt, or do you want me to take it?
Why don't you take it, please?
Okay, let me see.
Sorry.
Sherry, can you unmute?
Thank you again, Sherry and Matt. Yeah, I'm still getting the vicarious thrill of actually feeling like I'm a little bit in church. This is fun.